almost Christmas. It's like, even though it's not actually almost Christmas, it's in like a couple of days. Yeah, not a couple of days, a couple of weeks. Like 29? Sorry, I'm bad at math. No, I guess it's 29 and then 19. Okay. You got the point. Let's just get started with this video.
The fear of those guys who would dress up as Santa Claus. Did you ever used to have a fear of those guys who would dress up as Santa Claus in the mall or at Christmas parties?
No, I never had because I didn't really care.
Up until the age of about 8, I certainly did. I think I was 6 or 7 years old when me and my mom were walking through the mall with all the Christmas festivities and decorations up.
I really like this animation and not even know why.
The bands playing Jingle Bells, a giant tree in the center of the mall, and of course a mall Santa.
Wait, can you just back up a little bit? What kind of lights are those though? Like, not trying to be rude, but seriously, those are bad lights. Well, okay, it's not like I could draw better.
And of course a mall Santa sitting in a chair covered by a green blanket. There was a small line of kids and parents waiting to sit on the Santa's lap.
That's some cheese right there.
Maybe 2 or 3 kids. My mom insisted I sat on his lap. Normally it would be the other way around, the kid begging the parent to sit on the lap. But she knew how shy I was. There wasn't anyone by the mall Santa's side, like one of those people who calls the next child up. It was just him. When I sat on the stranger's lap, he grabbed me by the chest and said softly in my ear, "What do you want for Christmas?"
I want you to get the hell out of my ear, my guy.
I think I said a Game Boy Advance. He laughed and assured me I would receive one. Then, for whatever reason, my mom walked up to the Santa and said something quietly to him. He chuckled and
I don't really know what's reaction though. I think it's kind of obvious.
response to whatever she said, and then said no problem. My mom told me to wait there by the Santa for a few minutes until she came back. At this point, there were no more kids waiting to
So, first topic, Mom started getting kids.
sit on his lap, so his attention was directed at me. He told me to come over and sit on his lap again. I somehow obeyed, despite my fear of Santa Claus. When I sat on his lap, he pulled me closer to him so that my back was leaning on him. When I think back on this moment now, it's all the more painful and creepy.
Stop into 1 week ago. I was about to say, shut your mouth, Santa. You look like Piccolo.
Then whispered in my ear that he had a Game Boy Advance outside by his sled.
No, you don't. Shut your mouth. I was I would die for you as a Game Boy Advance back in the day. Bro, baby.
And if I followed him, I would get it right now and wouldn't have to wait until Christmas. My fear suddenly turned to excitement as I believed him. We both stepped off the
Cause you don't know my eye.
chair, and I followed him down one of the exit hallways, but
Right, that.
turned to excitement as I believed him. We both stepped off the chair, and I followed him down one of the exit hallways, but halfway through, he stopped and told me we should take a bathroom break first.
No.
We stepped into the bathroom, and he quickly locked the door. I turned and looked at him as he looked at me. But before anything else could happen, there was a frantic banging at the door. Somebody on the other side was yelling to open up. The Santa opened the door, and a man pulled him out and shoved him. The man then escorted me back to the center of the mall, asking me where my mom went. I watched as the fake Santa casually walked out the exit door.
That's funny.
And out of my sight. When my mom came back,
He really did get exposed though.
the man explained everything. I'm pretty sure he was watching the whole time. So he and my mom asked around to see if the mall hired any mall Santas for the day. They did not. Whoever that was
I knew it.
just a pervert dressed as Santa to get kids to sit on his lap.
Oh, well, thanks for telling me. It's not like I didn't know that, you know.
Possibly wait for a perfect opportunity to snatch one, just like he almost did me.
Next video, because I kind of need a 10-minute video, you know. Next video, which is this one.
But I was the designated driver among my group of friends after a party. My friends were Michael, Eddie, and Daniela. We live in the country, so anytime we wanted to go to the bars or parties, we'd have to travel long distances. That's why it's such a big deal for one of us to be sober enough to drive. We were driving down the 513, which is an unlit highway littered with the occasional house or two, but mostly forest. This story takes place on the way back from town. Daniela started to cry that she had to piss really bad. I told her she'd have
Well, that was kind of weird. But, you know, who cares?
to wait a while longer, but not gonna lie, I started to get the urge as well. That mixed with the fact that Daniela was now screaming in her drunken fit, I figured why not pull over to the side of the road and just piss somewhere in the woods. Daniela got out first,
I mean, is this even like the program here?
disappeared into the crops on one side. I went to the opposite side of the road and slightly into the woods just because I'm the type of person who can't have people watching
I actually watched this one before I think.
piss. I finished first and got back in the car. Eddie and Michael were singing to the roaring rap music playing on the radio, while I pretty much just sat there in silence, growing impatient. My two drunk friends didn't seem to find anything strange about the fact that Danielle had now been gone for 5 minutes. So I got back out to call her name. Michael has a much stronger voice than I, so when he screamed for her, it would be impossible for
I would scream. I wouldn't even scream, I would do it. But I'd be like, no, I wouldn't even be there by now.
her not to hear. But still, she didn't call back. I didn't want to go in those crops, but I kind of felt like I had to since she's my friend, and I was the most aware at that moment. I forced Michael to come with, since I was afraid to go in alone. Eddie stayed in the car, he was just too far gone at this point.
Was that some key? It didn't really, it clearly said he, but I'm pretty sure that's a he. I'm pretty sure, not to be like assuming gender, but pretty sure that's a he, but you know.
With the flashlight from my glove box, Michael and I pushed our way through the thick, overgrown crops, walking in the only direction we could think to go, straight away from the car. Michael was calling Danielle's name while laughing his ass off. I could understand why he was finding it funny in his condition, but I just wanted to make sure she was alright and get home. Over the sounds of her own footsteps brushing crops aside, and Michael's laughter, I heard something else in the near vicinity. I put my arm out to Michael's chest to halt him. Now all that could be heard was the night breeze blowing through the crops. "What is it?" Michael whispered, to which I responded, "Shh." "That." Michael called out Daniela's name again. I joined in, figuring it was just her trying to sneak up on us and scare us. And again, the footsteps stopped. So we walked a little deeper into the crops. That's when we
Wow, you're really messing up now.
came to a narrow clearing stretch. I looked to my left, as far down as the light would let me see, and then to the right. I could hear 3 footsteps, and then a couple crops pushed outward into the opening, as somebody stepped into view. At first my light was only revealing their legs, so by default, under the circumstances, I
This is actually really good art. I really like the art style.
assumed it was Michael. However, the light revealed it to be not Michael, but instead some random man who I'd never seen before. I ran for it back in the only direction I remembered coming from. I guess I ran so fast that it only took me about 10 seconds to make it back to the car. Eddie was passed out in the car at this point, so I didn't bother trying to get help from him. I was honking the horn to get Michael's and hopefully Daniela's attention.
Come on, let's just go back, huh?
It took me about 10 seconds to make it back to the car. Eddie was passed out in the car.
That's a she, I swear. I swear. That is it. Never mind, who the heck even cares anymore?
The this point, so I didn't bother trying to get help from him. I was honking the horn to get Michael's and hopefully Daniela's attention. The sight of that man just disturbed me. I didn't know if he owned this land or not. I continued to land the horn until finally, Michael came out of the crops, dragging Daniela, who seemed to be out cold.
Oh, you should have just left her, to be honest.
I got out to help him lift her back inside of the car and plop her on the seat. Michael pointed out the gash on her forehead, as if she had been struck with a heavy, sharp object. Michael seemed to be sobering up pretty quickly due to the situation. He advised I drive to the nearest hospital, which was 10 minutes away. The drive there was not fun. It was full of panic and yelling. We brought Daniela in to have her wound treated as soon as possible. It was only then that Michael explains to the nurses, not me, that he saw some guy dragging her collapsed, unconscious body before fleeing deeper into the crops after noticing him. He never mentioned that in the car, but it made perfect sense now. That man in the crops with us that night did this.
Okay.
It happened on a night that I was...
Well, that was actually a very good story. Mine, I guess. I'll leave his or her channel in the description. Bye.